Very special collections here. Here at the Missouri Valley Room, we learn such bits of Napoleonic trivia as this. Benoist Troost, physician, city father, and namesake of the famous boulevard, was born in 1786 in Holland. His medical training is uncertain, but he was reputed to have served as a medical steward in Napoleon's army. Kansas City's connection. Moving right along to something more important, I have a brief announcement. David McCullough. That's all. David McCullough, as many of you may know, he's going to be speaking here at the library tomorrow night, down on the first floor. He has a new book out on the Wright brothers. We have more than 1,000 RSVPs. If you want to attend, I would suggest you sleep in your car tonight. But you're still welcome. If you miss it, if you choose not to come, remember many of the library's programs are archived on our website. Sometimes they'll lead you to C-SPAN, where we have many programs recorded. But like tonight, we're recording this program for our website as well. And many of our speakers oftentimes are interviewed by KCUR on Central Standard or Steve Kresge's show Up to Date. So sometimes if you just can't make it down here and fight for a seat with 1,000 other people, you do have an alternative. First, for tonight, if you're here from Lafayette County, Missouri, you might be at the wrong talk. But I know how you could get confused. The town of Wellington, population 800, lies just a few miles east of Napoleon, population 200, and halfway between them, there is an unincorporated crossroads called Waterloo. You got it. Now, in preparation for this, I did look on a Lafayette County map, and I could not find a town of Lucre. But there is an upside to all this. For those of you who could not afford to go to Belgium for the bicentennial, we do have a local, cheaper alternative, and that is Wellington and Napoleon, Missouri. Now for our speaker. Dr. Richard Barbuto is a professor of history at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, and since 2004 has been the Deputy Director of the Department of Military History. He is a 1971 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and served for more than 2 decades in the Army as an armor officer. He retired from active duty as a lieutenant colonel and earned his PhD in history from KU. Dr. Barbuto is our bicentennial go-to guy. He spoke at the library in 2012 on the beginning of the War of 1812, and more recently with separate talks on the Battle of Fort McHenry, Francis Scott Key and the Star-Spangled Banner, as well as on Andy Jackson's victory at New Orleans. He is an acknowledged expert on this era as evidenced by his books, which include Niagara, 1814, America Invades Canada, published in the year 2000 by the University Press of Kansas, and his companion volumes on the U.S. Army campaigns of the War of 1812, recently published by the Center of Military History. Tonight, his topic is the 1815 Battle of Waterloo, Belgium, not Missouri. It is my great honor to welcome back to the library, Richard Barbuto.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming here this evening. As you know, I have a deep military background, and I like to start each of my presentation by recognizing veterans in the audience. So if there are any veterans here from the Battle of Waterloo, if you would identify.
Why, yes, I am a veteran of that battle.
Well, and sir, who would you be?
Oh, so I am Marshal Ney. Perhaps you have heard of me. I am very, very brave.
Marshal Ney, welcome here, but what in the world are you doing in Kansas City?
Oh, well, we are here for the annual Waterloo reunion. It's going to be fabulous. We are down at the Hotel Marriott. Everyone will be there. Let's see, there is Marshal Soult and the Iron Duke himself, Wellington. Grouchy should be there, although no one ever invites him anymore. He just shows up when he wants to. Who else? Lucre will be there, of course. He will be late, as usual, and probably drunk. Let's see, who else is there? Josephine is coming this year. She should liven things up. She's very popular, if you know what I'm saying. Let's see, who else is going to be here? Unfortunately, Napoleon is not going to show up this year. He is out having a vacation at some island. You know, this is the second time he has done this. Telling you. Anyway, I must bid you adieu. I cannot stay for your entire lecture. As you know, from the winter of 1812, I do not like to be the last one to leave. So I am going to bid you adieu now. Enjoy and have a wonderful time. Vive la France!
So Victor Hugo says, he writes that Waterloo was not a battle. It was a change in the direction of the universe. Where do we start to tell the story? Given 1 hour, I've got to start it pretty close to the Battle of Waterloo. In 1812, Napoleon invades Russia. The Russians push him out. He loses 80% of his army. In 1813, all the nations of Europe, except France, push the French army back across Germany. In 1814, they enter France, and they are banging at the gates of Paris. Napoleon knows he's lost his political support within Paris. They tell him he needs to abdicate his empire, and he agrees to that. What you see here is at the Palace of Fontainebleau, which is his personal palace, he's bidding farewell to his general officers and the Imperial Guard. And he's going to be sent to the island of Elba. Elba is a beautiful little island off the Tuscany coast. It's very beautiful, but it's very small. It's not large enough to hold his ego. Napoleon is an opportunist. He is clearly a military genius. He's politically astute, he's a man of action, and he needs to command. So he's very restless on Elba. While he's there, all the leaders of Europe have moved to Vienna. At the Congress of Vienna, they are dividing up the rest of Europe and giving it back to its various rulers. The person they choose to rule France is Louis XVIII, the younger brother of Louis XVI, who lost his head with his wife Marie Antoinette about 24 years prior to this. He's called back to Paris to rule. On the left is his official photograph. On the right is what he really looked like. Louis XVIII was obese. He suffered from gout, as you might imagine. He could not get around without his crutches, and only his doctor knew how many chins he had. When he came back to Paris, unfortunately, he brought with him thousands of the émigrés. This is the aristocracy that fled from France rather than lose their heads on the guillotine. So they were situated throughout Europe. But when Louis comes back, they come back. They expect to turn back the clock of the French Revolution. They want to go back to the way things were. The French people won't put up with that. There's a tremendous amount of social pressure. For example, when the aristocrats come back, they want to move into their mansions. They want to take over the land that they gave up 2 decades earlier. The peasants aren't going to put up with that. There's another tension here. The tension is within the army. The countries of Europe will not allow France to keep an army as large as Napoleon had, so it's cut down drastically. Louis XVIII fires the officer corps, puts them on half pay. Unfortunately, the pay is late or it doesn't arrive at all. So you have thousands of French officers who had fought under Napoleon who are being cheated of their pensions. and they're disgruntled to say the least. So now you have the social pressure and the pressure within the army, and all of it is building up. Now, back on Elba, Napoleon has his spies in France. He's listening to all that's happening. He's going to take the biggest gamble of his entire life. He decides to sneak off the island of Elba when the Royal Navy isn't looking, take about 1,000 soldiers, return to the southern coast of France, and start marching north towards Paris to reclaim the throne, to move into Paris. If he fails, they're not going to send him back to sunny Elba. He's going to go somewhere else, and he understands that. So he is gambling with his life and the lives of his men. Here are the headlines of Le Moniteur, the French newspaper, from the time he lands. I'm going to read these to you because I know you can't see someone at the bottom. 9 March, the monster has escaped from his place of banishment. 10 March, the Corsican ogre has landed at Cape John. 11 March, the troops are advancing on all sides to arrest his progress. He will conclude his miserable adventure by becoming a wanderer among the mountains. At this time, the 1st Regiment of Royalist troops marching down to intercept him stops him. Napoleon walks out in front of these soldiers. He says, "I'm your emperor, you all know me." He unbuttons his overcoat and he says, "Any of you who care to shoot me, this is your opportunity." Of course, nobody shoots. They all run and join Napoleon, lift him up on their shoulders, start carrying him off towards Paris. So now his army has gotten larger. 12 March, the monster has actually advanced as far as Grenoble. At this point here, Marshal Ney, who you just met earlier, is working for Louis XVIII. He goes to the king and says, "I will arrest Napoleon and I will bring him back to Paris in an iron cage." So he sets off with several thousand troops and he runs down, bumps into Napoleon's army. The two of them face off. Ney has a change of heart. He has no loyalty towards Louis XVIII. He has tremendous personal loyalty to Napoleon, who has called him the bravest of the brave. Ney changes sides and brings all his soldiers with him, and they all continue marching north to Paris. 13 March, the tyrant is now in Lyon. Fear and terror seized all at his appearance. 18 March, the usurper has ventured to approach within 60 hours' march of the capital. He's drawing closer. Bonaparte is advancing, but it is impossible he can reach Paris. At this point here, Louis XVIII is taking a ride in his carriage through Paris, and he sees some graffiti on a wall, and it says, "Dear King Louis, please stop sending soldiers. I have all that I need. Signed, Napoleon." Louis decides that the better part of valor is to become an emigre for the 2nd time. He jumps in his carriage and he rides off, and eventually he will go to England. The Emperor Napoleon is at Fontainebleau, his palace. And finally, 22 March, yesterday evening, His Majesty the Emperor made his public entry and arrived at the Tuileries. Nothing can exceed the universal joy. Napoleon resumes his throne as emperor, but he's got some very serious strategic problems. Remember, all the leaders in Europe are right there in Vienna. They hear that he's landed. They immediately declare him an outlaw. He has no protection from the law. If someone kills him, well, so what? No problem. The bigger problem for him, however, is that they mobilize their troops and start sending them west to the border of France, and they're going to physically throw him out of the country. They're going to make war against France yet again. The two arrows up front, we've got the Wellingtons army, which is British and Dutch and Belgian and German, and we have Lucre's Prussian army. They're already in Brussels ready to march. These other armies, the white arrows, are Austrian armies moving to the border, and way behind them is a Russian army moving to the border. Napoleon has a choice here. He will never have as many men mobilized as the Allies will. He just won't. But if he strikes early, he might be able to knock out Wellington and Blucher's army early before the other armies show up. That might convince the Europeans to maybe just leave him France as long as he doesn't extend his empire any further. So that's a gamble he's taking. So he's made a decision to go after those two armies. Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington, he wins battles. He wins battles in India, he wins battles in Spain. He's such a good general that the British make him a field marshal. He's still a young man. A fun fact on him is he's number 15 on the BBC's poll of the 100th greatest Britons. Lucre, a cavalryman, age 71, is delusional. His men call him Marshal Forwards. He's always advancing, he's always moving towards the enemy, he's always moving into the attack, and his soldiers absolutely love him. The fun fact on him is he is awarded the Order of the Grand Cross of the Iron Cross. Only 2 German generals have ever been given this award. The first one is Blücher, the second one is Paul Hindenburg in World War I. Hitler passed away before he was able to award that to anybody in World War II. Okay, this is Napoleon's team. Marshal Soult in the center is a great commander for battle. Unfortunately, Napoleon makes him his chief of staff. Soult doesn't know anything about chief of staffing. The chief of staff takes Napoleon's ideas, converts them into orders, and gets them out to the people that have to execute them. He's doing on-the-job training. He's trying real hard. This is not his strength by any means. On the right, we have Marshal Grouchy. Marshal Grouchy is an outstanding cavalry commander. He's given the right wing of the army, which is 85% infantry. He really doesn't know how to fight infantry. Nonetheless, he's commanding about a third of the French army. On the left, Michel Ney commanding the left wing. Ney is the bravest of the brave. He's a passable tactician. He knows nothing about strategy. He leads troops. His troops absolutely adore him. When he's in battle, he goes white hot. And when he's white hot, he makes poor decisions. And we're going to see some evidence of that at the Battle of Waterloo. Okay, here's how Napoleon is going to take on these 2 armies. Together, they outnumber him. Usually, Napoleon works his way around the flank of an army to turn it back upon itself. Well, he's got 2 armies. What he doesn't want to do is push these armies together. So he's going to take his 3 parts of the army and drive directly between the 2. He's going to mass on one of them to destroy them. And once he's done that, he's going to swing everybody by forced marches to take on the second one. He's done this before, a long time ago. This takes 2 things to happen. First, it means the French infantry have to march faster than the British or the Prussians. Not a problem. They've been doing it for years. But the second thing he needs is really good staff coordination. He's got to get the orders out to the units so that as soon as they wake up in the morning, they know what road they're on, what direction they're heading, when they need to leave, and what they need to do when they get to the end of the road. And that's where this plan is going to fall down. Okay, at the bottom, the dotted line, most of you should be able to see it. This is the border between France and Belgium. We have the River Somme. Charleroi has got all the bridges, and it's on the road directly leading to Brussels, and that's where Napoleon wants to be. Along the way, the crossroads at Quatre-Bras and Ligny, these are going to be major battles. Mont-Saint-Jean and Wavre will be the 2 additional battles, and we have Waterloo up here. There's absolutely no fighting at Waterloo. All the fighting is going to be immediately south of Mont-Saint-Jean. The person who wins the battle gets to name the battle. Wellington wins. He knows the Brits can't pronounce Mont-Saint-Jean. They can't do it. He picks the nearest location that English people can pronounce. That's Waterloo, true story. He knows the British can speak Waterloo because there's a train station and bridge in London named after this place. So he's good with Waterloo, and that's how it gets its name. Okay. The army crosses the Sambre River without being discovered by the Prussians or by the British. Eventually, the scouts pick them up. Blücher reacts fairly quickly. He puts his troops into motion heading to the west. He wants to join up with Wellington. Wellington doesn't react so quickly. He's really afraid that Napoleon is going to make a move to cut him off from his line of communication to the English Channel. So he always has troops to the west of him, but he does send some troops marching down the road toward Quatre-Bras. And here's that battle central position we talk about. And I need to talk you through this one because this one's complicated, and this is where the campaign starts going awry for Napoleon. Napoleon had told Ney, Wellington is the man we want to destroy. You confront him. I will join you with the reserve and the guard. We will mass on Wellington and destroy him. Meanwhile, Lucre brings many more troops to Ligny, and he's there to defend. Napoleon sees that he's got the bulk of the Prussian army here, but only a portion of the English army there, so he changes his center of direction. He's now going to mass on the Prussians. Ney is totally unaware of this. He expects Napoleon and the Imperial Guard to show up at any moment. Ney fights for Quatre Bras, repeated attacks, cannot take the crossroads. Part of his army is Count d'Erlon's army. They were way down in Charleroi. They did not get orders to march when everyone else did. So they're sitting around eating breakfast, and then about mid-morning the orders show up, and they should have been on the road hours ago. So they start their forced march to join Ney, because that was what their orders were. Napoleon has changed the game plan. He sends a colonel out to pick up d'Erlon and say, listen, I need you to fall into the rear of Blucher's army, and we're going to envelop him and destroy him. So d'Erlon turns his people 90 degrees and starts marching to the east. Two bad things happen, bad for Napoleon. First off, the commander here on the left flank doesn't know what the game plan is. He sees a cloud of dust. He sees thousands of troops marching. He thinks they are British. He gallops off to find Napoleon, tells Napoleon what he's seen. Napoleon sends out his scouts to find out what's going on. They come back and report, no, those are French guys. They're coming in towards us. d'Erlon has picked up the wrong road. He's supposed to come to the rear. He started coming towards the French, which is what scared the commander here. All right. Ney sees d'Erlon's troops marching away. He needs them to accomplish his orders of taking Quatre Bras. He sends his courier rushing out to speak to Count d'Erlon and to give him a preemptive order, turn your folks around and start heading toward Quatre Bras. And d'Erlon obeys the last order that he receives. At the end of the day, Ney still has not pushed Wellington off this road junction. Napoleon and Grouchy have defeated Lucre. They've thrown him back. They have not destroyed him, but Napoleon thinks that they're done for. And 20,000 French troops spent the day marching and did not fire a single shot at anybody. Had they shown up here, they would have completely defeated Lucre. Had they shown up here, they would have destroyed that detachment of Wellington. So the greatest opportunity for Napoleon to win this battle disappeared on the 16th of June. Okay, here's an event from Charleroi. What you have here is the 42nd Regiment of Foot, the Black Watch. They're forming line in the wheat field at Charleroi. A bunch of French lancers, a division of them, rides past them and attacks the Gordon Highlanders. The Gordon Highlanders form square. The commander of the French lancers turns his guys around, sees the backs of the 42nd, the Black Watch, facing the opposite direction. He orders a charge at them. The commander of the Black Watch sees what's going on, orders his people to form square. As they're forming square, they actually envelop about 24 of the French lancers inside the square. Those guys live for about 25 seconds, and the Scotch, take their bodies and throw them outside the square. The lancers are fighting with their lances with the Black Watch for about 20 minutes, and they cannot break into the square, and they retreat. The Black Watch has lost 50% of its people in that short battle at Quatre Bras. June 17th, a couple things happen. The rain is the big one. It rains just about all day. But more than that, Napoleon is absolutely lethargic. It takes him forever to issue orders. He finally tells Grouchy, follow up on Blucher, make sure Blucher doesn't come anywhere near the battle because I want to destroy Wellington. Grouchy's a little bit lethargic as well. He starts his advance a little late. He's not quite sure where Blucher is going. He eventually picks up the trail and follows him, but they don't make contact. Ney's told to move north along the road to Brussels, maintain contact with Wellington. Wellington's already broken contact. Benet's moving his people forward. The Imperial Guard falls in. They start moving north. It's raining. Towards dusk, Napoleon and Ney pull up and they see a bunch of campfires on a ridge line just short of Mont Saint-Jean. And Napoleon doesn't know if Wellington has just lit these campfires and he's still retreating to Brussels, or if he stayed there. So he sends a brigade of heavy cavalry trotting across the wet ground towards this ridgeline. About 40 British artillery pieces open fire, making Napoleon extremely happy, because now he knows that Wellington is going to stand and fight, and on the next day, the 18th of June, he should be able to defeat Napoleon. Wellington's happy too, because he just got a message in from Lucre. Wellington said, I will defend at Mont Saint-Jean if you can give me one of your corps. The Prussian army has 4 corps. He just wants 25% of Lucre's men. Lucre comes back with, I will give you a corps and I will send as many troops in addition to that as I have, and I will meet you at Mont Saint-Jean. So Wellington is happy too. Now the only people that aren't happy are the heavy cavalry that got shot up by the British artillery being used as the canary in the mine. Okay, coming to the Battle of Waterloo, the French bring these, the British, the Dutch, the Belgians, and various German states bring this number. They're already in position, and late in the day on the 18th, Blucher's going to show up with this many people here. So Blucher's going to join Wellington, even though Napoleon thinks, 1, it's highly unlikely, and 2, he will beat Wellington before Blucher could ever show up. Now here's what it looks like at Mont Saint-Jean. Waterloo's off the map to the north. This road here that heads to Wavre is on the ridge line. So what Wellington has done is he's put his people on the back side of the ridge where they cannot be seen or fired at by the French. He has, here this is a farmhouse complex. It's a walled villa. Les Saints is another walled area with a barn and a house. And out here are 3 little hamlets. And he's Wellington's going to put troops out there as a breakwater to kind of absorb the French as they're coming to, make the French stop and defeat those 3 locations before they can move forward. This is all his, he knows that they're sacrificial troops, but this is his plan to slow down Napoleon while he's waiting for Blucher to show up. This is what the troops look like. The filled-in rectangles are infantry. These guys here are cavalry. You can see how Wellington has dropped some troops forward of him. Most of the troops are behind the ridge line. This is a Dutch-Belgian brigade that doesn't get the word, and they're on the forward slope of the ridge line. Napoleon brings his folks up. There's a corps here, 4 divisions, another corps here. This is the Imperial Guard and some more reserves. Napoleon puts about 80 pieces of artillery here, and they're going to blow apart the line, but the only targets they have is this house here and this brigade here, and when the battle starts, that's who they're going to fire at. The battle starts so late because the ground is still wet, and Napoleon is asked to delay the attack until the ground dries up enough so that he can move the artillery forward. But even so, the ground is still pretty wet, and it's going to slow down the cavalry and the infantry. So the attacks are going to be a little slower than they normally would if the ground was hard. So he delays the attack. Wellington is thrilled because this gives him even more time for Blucher to come and join him. The attack kicks off, the artillery fires, they damage these people very badly, and Prince Jerome, the youngest brother of Napoleon, is a division commander here. He attacks the Hougoumont. He has orders to do that. The Hougoumont is defended by about 1.5 battalions of troops. Jerome sends a whole division at him. The battle for the Hougoumont is going to last all day long. The French are going to throw regiments and brigades at it. The British are going to infiltrate down companies and battalions. So the British will always be outnumbered, and yet the French will never be able to take the ville. Now this is what Hougoumont looks like. The French only break in one time. Lieutenant Legros, with the axe, smashes down the door. About 20 Frenchmen run into the courtyard. The British manage to close the gate behind him. They kill all the Frenchmen except one lad who's the drummer boy. He's the sole survivor of this group. That's the only time the French break into the Hougoumont. All right, Ney is the tactical chief of this battle. Ney's fighting the battle. Napoleon is under the weather, and he's watching what's going on, and he's making the big calls, but it's Ney who's actually fighting the troops. Ney sends this corps forward. As they march across the muddy area here, they will get up on the ridge line there, and the British musketry will knock them down, and these French soldiers will never be able to make contact with the British. It's a firefight. The French lose. They start backing up. As they back up, Wellington launches his cavalry brigades to pass through his men and to charge these guys as they're retreating. They charge hell-bent for leather. They pass through the infantry. Some of them make it all the way to the cannon, and they start sabering the cannoneers. Their horses are exhausted, and Ney sends in the French cavalry. The French cavalry on fresh horses overruns the British cavalry. About half of them never make it back to their lines. Now, this is the Scots Greys. They're called the Greys because they're on gray horses. It's a small regiment, fewer than 300 people. They're making this attack, so this is the initial attack. The Gordon Highlanders that they pass by run up, grab the stirrups of some of these horses so they can accompany the attack. Now, the Scots Greys, again, are going to be virtually destroyed in the French cavalry counterattack. So they will find their way back to the lines, and most of them will be somewhere on the battlefield. All right, we're going to kind of condense the action here. The next big action happens in the afternoon. Ney sees some movement right here. He thinks that the British have been so damaged that Wellington has ordered a withdrawal. Wellington has done no such thing, but it appears that way to Ney. Ney grabs a couple divisions of cavalry, and he sends them into the attack. He leads them into the attack. He gives them no artillery. He gives them no infantry support, just cavalry going across. Other cavalry commanders see this formation of thousands of cavalry moving forward. They figure, well, my orders didn't get to me, and they tag along with it. 5,000 cavalrymen are attacking the French lines. I'm sorry, the British lines. The British on the other side of the ridge know they're coming. The artillery fires at them until the last minute, then the artillery gunners run to the British infantry. The British infantry form squares. They've got a complete checkerboard of squares. They've gone from 2 ranks deep to 4 ranks deep, and they have their bayonets out in front of them. Now there's a dynamic that goes on here. A cavalry horse will ignore gunfire because they're used to it. They will charge where you tell them to charge. But if they see a line of bayonets, they will stop. They will not go into a line of bayonets. They may throw their rider into the line of bayonets, but they will not follow. And so the French, well, let's do this. So the French cavalry, through the squares, around the squares, can't make a dent on the squares. The French cavalry, each of these guys has 2 pistols, single shot. They pull those out, they fire those, they pull back from the battle, they reload, they rejoin. Ney then is so determined to win the battle right here, right now, he orders the Imperial Guard cavalry forward. There are now 10,000 French cavalrymen swirling around these squares, trying to break them. Not one square breaks. Now they're depleted. They keep falling in, making smaller and smaller perimeter, but none of them are broken. And after all this time, Ney finally orders the cavalry back. Napoleon is furious at Ney because he put together this uncoordinated attack, did not bring guns forward with him, did not bring infantry forward with him. Had the infantry gone right behind the cavalry, they might have done something with these squares. Had the artillery gone forward, it would have had a concentrated target. Neither of those things happened. Now, the bad thing for Napoleon is while these attacks are going on, who shows up but 2 corps of Lucre's army? They've been marching they got an early start, marching all day long over very rough terrain, and they're coming in behind Napoleon's lines. So they attack here at the village of Plansois. Well, Napoleon has got a reserve here, and he has to send his reserve to the east to stop the Prussians, because if the Prussians ever get to the road, there's no way to retreat. So there's fierce fighting here at Plancenoit. This is what part of it looks like. The village exchanges hands 3 times. What you're seeing here is a column of Prussians led by their officers through a very narrow road, and the French are just waiting for them. Fierce fighting. No one is taking any prisoners. Bodies are stacking up, as you can see from the graphic there. And eventually, Napoleon has to send in battalions of guard. So the Imperial Guard goes in, stabilizes the fighting at Plancenoit, and the Prussians back off just for the moment while they catch their breath. So the situation's been stabilized for the moment. Okay. Napoleon is desperate. His flank is being turned. The 3rd Corps of Prussians arrives. They attack the hinge of the line. The French army's hanging on by a thread. Napoleon knows if he's going to win, he's going to do it now. He takes 7 battalions of Imperial Guard. These are the guys with the bearskins. He sends them forward at the spot that they've been attacking all day long. And they march forward, trying to break the British line. This is one of those battalions marching forward. These guys have never been beat. They march forward, they come over the top of the ridge, the British open up with their musketry. These guys are stopped cold. And the rest of the army hears this because the roar goes up, la garde recule, the guard is withdrawing, and it panics the rest of the French army. They know the Prussians are behind them, cutting off their retreat. The British aren't budging, and even the Imperial Guard can't make a dent in the British line. Even the Imperial Guard starts backing off, except 1 battalion. General Cambron of the Imperial Guard forms square with his men to buy time for the rest of the French army and the Emperor to get out of the battlefield. The British roll up some artillery. Wellington sends a staff officer to the square, and he calls out, "Men of the Imperial Guard," Wellington sends his greetings. He knows what great fighters you are and how honorable you are, yada, yada, yada. And he invites you to surrender. The Imperial Guard sees the artillery. They know what's going to happen next. General Cambron yells out, "The Guard dies but does not surrender." The staff officer repeats his offer one more time. Now this time, there's a different roar that comes out of the crowd. And you could hear a pin drop up to this point here because everyone's very tense wondering what's going to happen next. Cambron swears that he did not yell the next word, but somebody did, and his troops believe that it was General Cambron. Some Frenchman yells out, "Merde!" The British staff officer rides away. The British artillery opens fire and destroys this Imperial Guard battalion. Napoleon realizes he's lost this battle. He gets a horse, he gets his staff, and they ride back to Paris to stabilize the political situation. And Grouchy and Ney withdraw the army. They're being pursued every step of the way by Lucre. Wellington is resting his army, and Blucher's picking up the pursuit. Remember, he's Marshal Forwarts, and he's pushing on to Paris. And over the next several days, he will eventually get to Paris. Napoleon gets to Paris. The Chamber of Deputies will no longer, they're not going to make war inside of France. They're not going to lose Paris. They tell him he's got to leave Paris, and the Chamber of Deputies will elect a government and try to make peace with the Allies who are coming up very quickly. Napoleon finally says, okay, gets in a carriage, heads west to the Atlantic, to the coast, to Rochefort. When he gets there, he's going to jump a ship and come to America. The problem is the Royal Navy is already sitting off of Rochefort, and they know that Napoleon's going to try to escape. Napoleon negotiates with the captain of the British ship, the Bellerophon, and Captain Maitland agrees to take Napoleon on the ship and bring him to England, because Napoleon wants to, if he's going to surrender, he's going to surrender to the English rather than the Prussians. Remember, he's an outlaw. Blucher has threatened many times to just string him up as soon as he sees him, and he knows that Blucher would do such a thing. Unfortunately, the ship takes Napoleon off the coast of England, and the English government gets involved, as they should, and they say he's not setting foot on English territory. They ship him to St. Helena, which is a volcanic island under British control in the South Atlantic. There's no way off that island. And he's going to stay there for the next 5 years of his life. Now, well, let's go here. Let's talk about the casualties. Here's the casualties from the battle that we call Waterloo. Somewhat even across, but these 15,000 missing French soldiers, these folks here are deserters. As soon as they see that the game is up, Napoleon has left, I can't support the emperor anymore, they shuck their uniforms, they go back to their homes, and they try to fit in with the crowd like they were never there. Some of them make it. The rest of them stay with Grouchy and Ney and Soult, and they find their way back to Paris. Louis XVIII returns to Paris, reestablishes control. And now he introduces what is known as the White Terror. White is the color of the Bourbons. So we had the original terror that killed all the aristocrats and his brother and sister-in-law, and now he's going to inflict the White Terror. He sends the police out with a list of people to arrest. Thousands of names. These are Bonapartists. These are officers, marshals, generals in the army. These are civil servants who worked for Napoleon's government and have pledged their loyalty to Napoleon. They're on arrest lists. The word gets out to some of the French officers, your name is on the list, to include Soult and Grouchy. Thousands of French officers and soldiers are going to flee the country and get away. Over 1,000 are coming straight to the United States because we weren't in the war. And they land here and they set up, and they're living there. Now, both Grouchy and Soult will come to America, stay 5 or 6 years, and eventually when the heat is off, they're going to return to France. And Grouchy himself is actually going to be invited to become a general again in the Royal Army, and he's going to accept that position. 300 folks will be arrested, tried in kangaroo courts, sentenced to die, and be executed, including our friend and hero, Marshal Ney. And that was the White Terror. 1821, Napoleon is going to die on the island of St. Helena. No one's quite sure what caused his death. Stomach cancer? Probably. Endocrinological problems? Absolutely. The conspiracy theory is that the British governor was ensuring that small amounts of poison were being fed into his food, and that he eventually died of arsenic poisoning. So that's a conspiracy theory. He's buried temporarily on St. Helena, but eventually his body is going to be exhumed, moved to Paris, put in a tomb under the dome of Les Invalides. So you can go there today and see Napoleon's tomb in Paris, and he is back there. Now, I told you all of that to bring you to this point here, so we're going to have a sing-along. I know you all know the tune. You might not know the lyrics, so I've got the first stanza printed up there and the refrain, so we can sing this. This was published, 31 years ago. Still kind of a lively, so I detect a certain amount of reluctance to stand and... All right, we won't sing. We will cover 3 fun facts from the Battle of Waterloo. First fun fact, Antoine Favreau, a cavalryman in the French Carabiniers. He's making one of those attacks when an Allied cannonball hits him in the chest. You can see right through the other side. It exits the back of his chest and ruins his day. And the Carabiniers breastplate here, you can see it today. It's on display at Waterloo. First fun fact. Second fun fact. William Paget, Earl Oxbridge, is the British Allied cavalry commander. He's led many of those charges during the day, personally very brave. He and Wellington do not get along very well. Oxbridge ran off with Wellington's brother's wife, so there's a little family friction there. Very brave man. Nonetheless, towards the end of the battle, he's on his horse next to Wellington on his horse. A cannonball that was aimed at Wellington, I guess, goes whipping through, takes off his leg. Uxbridge looks down, looks at Wellington, and he says, "By God, sir, I've lost my leg." Wellington looks over and says, "By God, sir, so you have." Uxbridge falls off the horse. They run him to a farmhouse in Mont Saint-Jean. A couple surgeons show up there. They amputate the leg. Eventually, Uxbridge is going to return to England, and he will get a prosthesis. Now, the farmer buries the leg, puts a stone on top of it, marking it. And for decades, when British visitors come to the battlefield, they all go to this farmer's farmhouse to see Uxbridge's leg buried there, and they pay the farmer money. Uxbridge dies. His wife really wants to reunite all of his bones in one place. There's some dealings here that even today we're not quite sure how it happened, but there is a macabre trade going on here. And basically, the farmer's family, the farmer's gone, farmer's family exhumes the bones, send them to England, and Countess Uxbridge sends the prosthesis back to Waterloo, where it is for your viewing when you get there. So that's there. So how about that for a fun fact? Our last fun fact. The Belgian dentists, after the battle, go to the battlefield, exhume the bodies, pull the really good-looking teeth out of the skulls, and make dentures with them for the rich and famous who've had their teeth rotted out and need dentures. These are known as Waterloo Teeth, made from the soldiers of folks who died at Waterloo. And people are very proud to own them. And several of these dentures are on view at Waterloo for you to see. 3 fun facts. And I entertain your questions. Yes, please.
Well, you started off by saying Napoleon is such a military expert.
Yes.
Brilliant man.
Yep.
Yet, was his orders simply not followed or misinterpreted? How did everything go so wrong?
Yeah, all of the above.
Did he just have a bad
He had a bad week. I mean, he was extremely lethargic. Everyone's saying he's not himself. As I said, he had endocrinological problems. He probably had a bad stomach. There are days when he just can't get anything done, and unfortunately that hit him during this period here. But then Soult was not a good chief of staff. He did not get the orders exactly right. Some of the orders were ambiguous. They arrived late. Ney and Grouchy looked at the orders. Sometimes they obeyed them to the letter, and sometimes they were off the reservation. So a combination of all of those, and Blucher's good, and Wellington's good. They're just good. They had their own problems, but they were good. Yes, please.
Were the military tactics that were used at the Battle of Waterloo, historically, it seems to remind me of Roman to Civil War reenactments. Really, it does. The same strategy. Everybody lining up,
Yes.
lockstep forward, the square shape.
Yes.
Why did he not invent new military tactics
Right.
to avoid slaughter?
Okay, the question is, why didn't Napoleon invent new military tactics to avoid slaughter? The tactics used here are perfectly matched to the weapon systems. The short-range musket that's inherently inaccurate, and the cavalry arm. And artillery that has a certain amount of range but not very accurate. These are not rifled weapons at all. Given those weapons, you want to mass fire, and it's not aimed fire, it's just sending as many bullets down range as fast as you can. To do that, you want as many people lined up shoulder to shoulder to do that. And so the tactics are perfectly matched to the weapon systems that are available in the day. It changes when we have the mini ball, rifled muskets, things like that, all of us, rifled cannon, then the tactics have to change, but not until then. Sir?
Well, I was just going to say that somebody once has put a very good comparison of those tactics of rock, paper, scissors.
Okay,
Yeah, that, you know, the infantry square will
Right.
defeat the cavalry, but the cannons defeat the square.
Yep.
But the line will defeat the infantry.
Yes.
It's just a very complicated game of rock, paper, scissors.
Yes, indeed. The observation is that the infantry, the artillery, and the cavalry, rock, paper, scissors, yes, each one is complementary. One of them can defend against one of the others, but not both of the others. So if you can challenge someone with cavalry and artillery, then the infantry doesn't know what to do. Do they form square? If they do, they're a concentrated target for the artillery. If they stay in line, the cavalry will run them down. And the same with the cavalry and artillery. Yes, good observation. Sir?
I want to ask, what role did riflemen play, particularly on the British side? What kind of, were they pivotal in some instances, or did they not play a very great role?
What role did riflemen play on the British side? Okay.
I've seen that site when they were there.
Yes, there's a couple battalions of riflemen, and they are near Les Saints. They're in a gravel pit right next to it, and they do very well, but there's not very many of them. And many of the riflemen are in the King's German Legion or the Hanoverian troops, so there's plenty of riflemen there. But again, they are not a decisive weapon on that battlefield because there aren't that many of them. Questions on this side, perhaps? No. Okay, good. Back here, sir.
Why is Napoleon using Soult as his chief of staff
Right.
instead of his longtime
Berthier, right. Berthier has been his chief of staff forever. He's superb. He threw himself out of a window and killed himself a couple of months before the battle.
battlefield?
What, will that answer your question? John, please.
Yeah, hey, Rich, we noticed that we've got this massive coalition of Prussians, British, Dutch, Belgians, and then the Russians are coming, and then the Austrians are coming, and the Spanish actually are coming too. Why can't Napoleon do coalition warfare? Why won't anybody play with Napoleon? Why can't coalition warfare
Right.
work for Napoleon?
Napoleon must command, which is one of the reasons why he had to get off of Elba. There wasn't enough to command. He's born to command. He needs to command to live. And command means you're going to invade somebody and win more glory for France and for yourself personally. I don't think he writes a letter saying, don't attack France, just let me be the king of France and I'll be satisfied. No one believes him. He doesn't believe himself. It's purely propaganda in my estimation. Therefore, they must destroy him. That's in a nutshell, that's my answer. Yes, please.
So if Napoleon, so when he comes back and all these people are joining him, why doesn't he have a better selection of generals if that's really his falling point?
Right. He took his best marshals and because they were going to have independent command, and he puts them on the border north and south of Switzerland because he won't be there. So he needed his best generals there if the Austrians and the Russians show up. So he knows he's taken the second string, but even given the second string, he really might have wickered that a little differently to get a better result. Good question, though. Yes, please.
Well, initially you said Napoleon only came back with 20% of his army from Russia. But they didn't win anything. They just died from disease initially. And so all those people that left Russia, both left, were not fleeing the Russians, but had to retreat because they all died on the field. And so if they had come back with all the people, like instead of being only 20%, what would that have done for Napoleon?
I think if Napoleon had come back from Russia with more troops, maybe 250,000 instead of 50,000 under his control, I think Prussia and Austria wouldn't have been so quick to declare war upon him. Remember, the Austrians and the Prussians were his allies for the invasion of Russia. Eventually, they changed sides. I think if Napoleon had controlled 250,000 people, the Prussians and the Austrians probably would not have been so quick to turn on him. John, what do you think? Where'd John go?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's in Russia that Napoleon's coalition warfare construct goes south. He's not a good partner. He doesn't treat the Prussians, the Austrians, the Bavarians, the Württembergers, all these other kingdoms that he brings along with him into Russia, he doesn't treat them as equals. He treats them as subordinates. He orders them around, just like you said. And so when he retreats, he puts the Austrians on one flank, and he puts the Prussians on the other flank, and at the first chance, the Austrians declare themselves neutral, and the Prussians declare themselves neutral, and all of a sudden his army goes from 100,000 to 50,000, just as you said. And so he's not very good at coalition warfare. And you have to go all the way back. You go all the way back to the beginning to find how he treats his allies. Treats them very poorly. A lot like the Germans treat their allies in the 20th century.
Good analogy. Please.
Thank you. You mentioned the lethargy of the weak. A, was he always not known to be moody? And B, is there a consensus about a psychological profile?
So, is there a consensus on a psychological profile? And what was the first question?
And was he not always known to be moody, which is not exactly lethargy, but could play into that? And you mentioned the lethargy that week, but was he always not at least moody and volatile, or did I get that wrong?
Boy, there sure is evidence of that, isn't there? If you got into his brain, he's got his own internal logic, and he's thinking expansively. So what appears to someone to be an off-the-wall decision might be very well thought out. So how do you judge that? As far as is there a psychological analysis of him that folks will sign up for? I don't think so. I've not read where a bulk of people say, this is his type and this is why he acted the way he did. He's certainly narcissistic. He's got that going for him. Sir, please.
Say a little bit about the quality and the availability of arms compared to the number of soldiers.
Quality and availability of arms compared to the numbers of soldiers. Everybody at Waterloo had a weapon that worked.
And how long would it have taken to assemble that amount of weapons?
Most of it existed in arsenals before the campaign. And the French have, Napoleon has conscripted 150,000 more folks from the class of 1815. They're in barracks, they're learning how to be soldiers, and the factories are cranking out weapons and canteens and knapsacks and uniforms as fast as they can. So if those troops had ever come into battle, maybe in September, October, they would have had pretty much all that they needed. Sir?
Yeah, could you maybe talk about like the loss of horses that he suffered in the War of 1812 and also Battle of Waterloo? I mean, that's got to be a pretty good resource for France.
Oh my gosh, yeah. France was running out of horses. They absolutely were. And the losses would have been, the losses at the battle were phenomenal. The cavalry arms would have been just a shadow of themselves had the war continued. The French horse farms, they were depleted. Same thing on the Allied side as well, because Germany had been in the middle of conflict for 20 years themselves. Every horse that could be used by cavalry riders is taken. Every draft animal that can pull artillery is being conscripted, commandeered. So yeah, the farmers didn't have many horses to run the farms. They sure didn't. Good point, good question. Sir?
Could you comment on the historical perspective of the Battle of Waterloo? Maybe if you looked at it more than 300 years from now, 500 years from now, what is the significance, do you think, of this particular battle, strategically?
I will tell you this. The English won the battle, the British. They wrote the history in English. That's the history we've been fed here in America for 200 years. And it wasn't until 30 or 40 years ago that most Americans even knew that the Prussians were involved. Wellington could not have won that battle without the Prussians. But if you read the dispatches and the English historians, you don't pick up on that. The role of the Prussians is kind of muted. Interesting story, in World War I, the British are taking prisoners, and they're taking German prisoners, and they've got, some of them have the band around their arm that says Waterloo. And the British can't understand why these Germans have got a British battle that they've won on their uniforms. These regiments were the regiments that fought for Prussia, or actually under the Brunswickers, under Napoleon at Waterloo. Their regiments earned those. But the English did not understand that 100 years later. And a question over here, please.
What was the economic impact of the farms buildup and horses and the impact on the farms and the economies of France, Britain, and Germany, and maybe to a lesser extent?
Right. The loss of manpower in the wars is detrimental to the agrarian sector. Interestingly enough, and I'm not an economist, but what I've read is that the economy of France bounced back much quicker than the economy of Britain, and I don't know why that is. So there is a lull for a while. There's, let's see, there's the big recession in what, 1819, 1820, that kind of hurts everyone. It hurts Britain the worst, and for whatever reason, France bounces back very quickly. I don't know that I can answer your question any more than that. The manpower is gone to run the farms, that's for sure. The animals are gone for a while. It just takes a while to raise another generation to do the agricultural work.
Two more questions.
Two more questions.
A practical question, and you being a battle commander, how do you enforce discipline? I assume the British troops were conscripted also.
Right. Well, actually they enlisted.
To make men line up on the front row
Right.
of a square,
Right.
which is suicidal.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, the front row of the square actually isn't, because those guys are kneeling with the bayonets up. So they're protected from the horses, and the cavalry soldiers with the swords can't reach them. It's the second line in the square that's taking the beating. But yes, how do you get men to stand up in battle? Part of it is practice, 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 and you've got your NCOs there physically abusing you if you disobey the orders.
Who?
Your sergeants. The sergeants and corporals are there. Don't step out of line. In the British had sergeants with pikes, spears, standing behind the line. And their order was, if any of your soldiers in front of you turn to run, and the soldiers knew that, they could face possible death to the front and certain death in the rear. And behind them, you had the MPs, the military police, called by different names in different armies. These are cavalrymen, and their job is to make sure nobody leaves the battlefield without permission. And the troops know that too. Last question. Sir?
Napoleon's second wife was a countess in Austria.
Right.
Why did Austria fight if there was if his wife was Austrian?
The Emperor of Austria marries a niece, I believe, to marry Napoleon. Napoleon, after he divorces Josephine for no children, he must have an heir. He shops around Europe. For whatever reason, the Emperor of Austria offers up this niece. They get married. She's in Austrian territory during this campaign with their 5-year-old son, who's the King of Rome, and many people call him Napoleon II. Metternich in Austria finds a cavalry captain to go to Marie-Louise and to become her lover, which keeps her in Austria and keeps her from allowing her child to be sent to France, where Napoleon desperately wants his son in his household. Is that enough for you?
Let's thank our speaker.